Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. We're hosting the weekly THORChain Hangout here from the THORGuards account today. We'll be back on the THORChain official Twitter account next week. Today, this is 0x Saigon. I have the pleasure of hosting THORChain lead developer Chad Barraford for a discussion on this week's updates at the protocol level for THORChain, and we might be joined by some ecosystem developers and builders for some ecosystem updates as well. So stay tuned for that. Got a fun itinerary agenda for you guys here today. Here we go. Here we have Mr. B. Chad, can you hear us? Let us know. You're muted.
Sorry, muted. Yeah, I'm here. I'm ready.
Awesome.
I'm available.
Sounds good. Let's let everyone trickle in over the next couple minutes. Everyone, thank you guys for tuning in. We're hosting this week's THORChain weekly live stream here on the THORGuards account this week, and we'll be back on the THORChain official Twitter account next week. But today, this is 0x Saigon, and I'll be chatting with Chad B here for some ecosystem updates. I'll be discussing a few different things. Chad, how's your week going?
Going pretty good. Not too shabby. Can't complain.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. I'm looking forward to it. We got some exciting stuff happening at the protocol level, some good stuff happening at the ecosystem and L2 level. So we'll be covering a bunch of good stuff here.
Lots of action.
A lot of good stuff. And let me actually see if I can promote you to co-host.
Make me a co-host. There you go.
And we have Badgers and Bull from our friends at THORSwap and THORChad's DAO. Exciting week for them as well. So we'll get them on stage here at the end during the ecosystem updates section. And then I guess everybody here is listening, but for future reference, we're recording this now, and as always, we publish the recordings on runebase.org podcast, so you can check that out later at runebase.org. With that, let me see here. Chad, you'd sent me a list of some things. Was that in?
It was in the
Discord?
Telegram, I think.
Telegram, okay. Let me make sure I can pull that up. Chad B. Bot. Huh. Is it in Telegram? I'm not seeing it in Telegram or...
Yeah, Telegram, the THORChain Weekly.
Oh, that's right.
Thing.
Yeah, very cool. Awesome. So we do these THORChain Weekly calls every Friday. We generally switch off between U.S. time zones twice a month and Eastern Asia/Europe time zones twice a month. I've been hosting the weekly U.S. side or weekly Western side. And then we've handed off between Thor Lady and Archon on the Eastern side. Oh, also shout out to Familiar Cow, who hosted last week's or 2 weeks ago, the US time zone. So Familiar Cow has been a great support as well. And with that, let's, I guess we can go ahead and hop in. Chad, I think I generally think of you as a man who needs no introduction in the THORChain ecosystem, but for anybody who might be uninitiated, do you want to give a super quick introduction to who you are and your role in THORChain?
Yeah, sure. My name is Chad Barraford. I'm one of the core devs on the project. Been around for quite a while, helping to build and focus on designing and building the core protocol, which has been the most fun I've ever had professionally, I would say, because it's a fun project to work on for sure. Yeah,
awesome.
And I'm just here to kind of answer some questions and talk more about recent developments and all that fun stuff.
Fun stuff indeed, and we're grateful to have you on the protocol and have you on this call. So the one Chad to rule them all, as we like to say. I'm 0x Saigon, founder of runebase.org, where we do news, guides, and a weekly podcast dedicated towards education and onboarding into the THORChain ecosystem. Also a co-creator of the THORGuards NFT project and proud host of the THORChain Weekly here alongside Chad. So yeah, thank you all for tuning in, and let's hop into this week's kind of rundown. So a few things that we put together here to discuss this week, but discussions around pooled validators, a conversation that's been kind of teased or discussed and planned for several weeks or even maybe a couple months now. I remember hearing the first mentions of this, so we have some updates on that. Retiring BEP2 and ETH Rune. This is super interesting. As everybody knows, there's 3 types of Rune in the wild today, which can be confusing for a lot of members of the community. There's BEP2 Rune, there's ETH Rune that runs on the Ethereum chain, ERC20 Rune, and then there's native Rune. And so updates on what's happening with that trifecta, if you will. Vulnerability in TSS, the threshold signature scheme. And there's some contributions that the THORChain team made to the core TSS protocol, if you will, that benefits not just THORChain but the entire crypto ecosystem at large. Dodo pool being retired, going to 0, and then StageNet and chain clients. Some updates on StageNet, which is a very exciting update from this week. Chad, is that everything? Is there anything else that we might touch on over the next hour, 30 minutes, whatever?
Well, there might be some. Excuse me. There might be some more, but we only have 1 hour.
Yeah, we'll take it as it comes. Awesome. So let's hop in, starting with pooled validators. First, what are pooled validators? And then we'll talk about where we are with them.
Yeah, so sorry, my throat's like all scratchy all of a sudden.
Oh
no. Yeah, so the team's been thinking about this kind of larger issue or our challenge, which is to how do we scale the bond the bond side of the network. Why am I so weird?
You want to? No worries. You got a cup of water.
That's so weird. I'm gonna walk and get some water as I continue to raspy my way around.
Take your time.
My plates here.
No, the same. Good.
So the question is, how do we do this, right? And we've been discussing publicly and within the team as well, and also publicly with the larger community, of the best way to how we get more room on the bond side, right? And so we've really come up with really 2 different general approaches. And these things aren't mutually exclusive. You can do both of these things if you really wanted to. And then there's some implementations of each one of these things that makes it a bit more complicated to solve, or not to solve, but to
Chad,
decide.
Before we hop into that, what if I take a quick stab at like describing the problem here, get everyone up to speed on the same page, and then we can talk about the solution. So essentially, 2 times the amount of Rune needs to be pooled collectively across the nodes that run the THORChain protocol, and 2 times the value of assets locked in liquidity pools. So in order for liquidity pools to deepen, and for liquidity to deepen, and in order for liquidity pools to grow, a lot of Rune needs to be, twice that amount of Rune needs to be bonded at any given point. And right now the requirements for running a node are both high technically. You have to be basically experienced DevOps. It's a very active, it's not passive income, it's a very active role from a technical standpoint. And then it's also a large financial requirement. What is it, 300,000 Rune right now, like minimum? And so depending on the value of Rune in a given day, that could be $1 to $2 million right now almost. And so pooled validators is one of the potential solutions that's being proposed. So with that context, let's talk about the
excellent recap there. So the reason why you have to have this kind of this restriction is to ensure that all the people who are kind of holding all the money, so to speak, all the assets, that they always have more to lose at any given moment than they have to gain. So if they were to go malicious and steal a bunch of funds, then they would always lose money in that transaction, which is the only way you can economically ensure that they won't steal, because you economically ensure that they're going to lose no matter what they do, right? That's a kind of important thing. Not every cross-chain DEX does this. A lot of them just kind of say, like, I was looking at one actually yesterday, and I'm not going to name which one because I don't want to, throw mud or anything like this, but they had all the validator bond of that coin was like, I think like $288 million worth of dollar value. And then the TVL of the project was like 600 million. Right. And so so now you're at this situation where all these validators, they put up, 288 million to secure $600 million of assets, which means that if you were to acquire 2/3 majority of the bond, which is about like 180 or 190 million, whatever the hell the number is, you can invest almost $200 million, and then you can steal $600 million. And that's a problem, at least from my perspective. That's an issue.
A helpful analogy that I use here to kind of like help people who don't understand like this notion of node, like a bond, is like a security deposit, right? And a security deposit, if you're going to rent a house or rent a car, it economically disincentivizes you from like messing up that apartment or messing up that car, right? Because you have skin in the game,
right?
And so in this case, the security deposit is not enough. The example that you mentioned is not enough to disincentivize that behavior.
If you pay a $50, security deposit to like rent a car, and then you total the car, it's worth like $40,000. It's like, well, here's my security deposit. Like, or you just steal the car entirely. You just take it home and you just like sell it for 40 grand, and you're like, well, go ahead and keep my $50. That's fine. Yeah. I just made $40,000. Like I'm doing great. Like, so that's the importance of this. That's why we've always kind of stressed this from the beginning of it. If you want to have a cross-chain DEX, this is what you kind of have to have from an economic perspective. Otherwise, you're designed to be economically insecure from the white paper, right? If it's a not cross-chain DEX, it's just like a uni or a sushi, then you don't need to worry about this because you offload security to something else. Right. And you don't have that issue. But if you're doing cross-chain DEX, it's a different kind of beast that you're taking on. It's a lot more difficult in many respects. And so you have different requirements. So anyways, how do we scale up the bond side? Right. And so the two high level concepts, and then we can break into small pieces if you want to go deep. I don't know how deep you want to go in this. Is allowing several people to combine together to create a node together. So you might have a situation where, for example, maybe you have a bunch of Rune, but you're not technically DevOps professional, and so maybe you want to come up to something like 9 Realms, for example, and say, hey, 9 Realms, you got the technical expertise, you know how to run a Thor node, you've done this 1,000 times, so to speak. So I'll give you some Rune, and then you run the node on my behalf, and then we all prosper from that scenario. Great. Now historically we've been against this notion to some degree because you can't just have like a delegated proof of stake, and meaning that you can just have anons providing liquidity to other anons. And the reason why that is because of two reasons. So one is in a THORChain's design, we have these like Yggdrasil vaults, which is like a 101 vault, and so if you give an anon a bunch of money and they run a node and they have access to all the Yggdrasil funds, they can just like go ahead and rug pull you and steal all the Yggdrasil funds, walk away richer person. Technically speaking, that's actually beneficial for the network. Actually, it's helpful for the network because the pools get deeper when that happens. But for you as an individual, you just got rug pulled and you just got screwed out of whatever money we're talking about, and that sucks for you. The other reason why that it's problematic is that you don't want to get to a place where somebody can have more where somebody can cyber attack the network via producing Rune from other people's Rune and that don't have their own skin in the game. Like they provide almost no Rune and they convince all these other people in the world, like the rest of the community, blah blah blah, whatever, to provide Rune for them, and then they get enough Rune or enough nodes, they can cyber attack the entire network and then steal everything. And because they put no Rune up to begin with, like they have no loss, right? They have no problem there. So the first notion was a pooled validated nodes, which sounds similar to that. And the difference is that it'd be limited to, you have to KYC each other. You can't just have anons throwing up anons, right? So in order for me, if I'm gonna run a validator and maybe the Thor guards wants to use some Rune to contribute to my node, we'll just say we have to have communications outside of THORChain, right? We have to have like a Telegram conversation or meet up in person, email, WhatsApp, whatever. And you have to give me your Thor address, and then I whitelist your Thor address for my node, and then you can contribute Rune to my box, right? And because of that, you really can't Sybil attack in that way because it requires like face-to-face or conversations to have. It's not like you're just kind of deploying a marketing campaign and just like, convince a bunch of people through like ads and stuff to just dump huge quantities of Rune to a particular node. It becomes much more impractical in that sense. So I would have to convince you to like, hey, you can trust me. We know each other. We basically KYC'd each other. And if anything were to happen tomorrow, like if I were to like steal the Unisol funds, like, who I am. Like, my name is Chad. My address is this, and we have maybe have a contract between you, like a legal entity between you and I that we are like a signed contract. It's up to the individuals to decide how they want to structure that. That's not up to the network to decide that. It's up to how people want to do that. Like Nine Realms, if they were to do this, they probably have like a contract that you both sign, and and have like all that kind of stuff. That's the first approach, right? The second approach, and so I've actually, by the way, been building that out, not to necessarily deploy it, but just to kind of help me think through the problem, just to have it, like write it out, code it up, have it as like something at the ready. If we want to do it, if the community wants to do this. But for me, it helps me to understand the problem and think through every little nook and cranny by just actually implementing the entire thing, which takes about a few days or a week. Anyways, that's the first concept. The second concept is vault nodes, or AKA light nodes, and it's a similar thing, but it's instead of being a validator, you're just securing assets. You're not contributing to consensus. You're not contributing to threshold signatures. You're basically just a Yggdrasil vault by itself, sort of, right? And so because you're not a part of consensus in that scenario, it doesn't matter how much Rune you collect from as many people as you collect from. You can't Sybil attack the network this way because you're not part of consensus. You can't hijack the network in a matter of speaking. It doesn't matter how much Rune you collect, right? So the network is safe from that scenario. Now, you're still not safe from the scenario of I've convinced a bunch of people to give me a bunch of Rune to run a vault node, and then I got a few million dollars in there and in my vault node, and I just steal the funds and run away. Right, that's still possible, and that's why you need to make sure that you are aware of each other and KYC each other, and protect yourselves. Like you could do this with your friends, possibly, and maybe with companies that you sign contracts with, but you wouldn't want to do it with like some guy who messages you on Discord and says, "Hey, I got a vault node, give me your Rune." Like you wouldn't want to probably do that because that would be there's a good chance you get your funds kind of taken from you. So don't do that. Make sure you're doing it very safe and secure and well thought out and all these kind of things. Yeah, those are the two.
Can I ask a question about that?
Shoot.
What's the downside of a model similar to like the Terra ecosystem validators? Like delegated validators. I can just go on Terra Station wallet and delegate to a whole menu of known docs validators.
Delegated has a couple of problems around delegated. So first of all, delegation always leads to centralization. You can't do without doing that. Because you're giving up voting power as well to somebody else, right? Effectively. But more importantly, because we are securing external assets that are not native to THORChain itself, if somebody were to do delegate from stake, you could get yourself into a situation where you can Sybil attack the network and take all the funds. You can't really do that with Terra or with Cosmos. Well, in Cosmos, you might be able to do it with Gravity Dex, actually, because now they're going to start, IBC kind of creates that potential. But you are putting yourself in a situation where somebody could convince enough people to give me their Rune or their delegated, asset of some kind. And then with enough of those given to me, I can now Sybil attack the network and literally take it over and become, more or less God, quote unquote, and be able to change anything that I saw fit to change in the entire network. I can go ahead and mint myself, 100 million Rune tokens if I chose to, right? Or I could rewrite everybody's LP positions and like give it to myself, right? So you don't want somebody to cyber-attack the network, and by doing delegated proof of stake, you're making that a lot easier to occur. And when the situation where you're dealing with external assets, the risk is much higher. If it's just a chain by itself, then like the only thing you're going to do is just cause the entire chain to implode because it becomes unreliable, right? And the coin will go to zero and everybody will lose and the whole thing will go to nothingness. But when you're maintaining external assets like Bitcoin, like Ethereum, like Tether, like Luna, those things don't go to zero. It doesn't matter what happens to your chain. The chain could be taken over 100% by one individual, which would suck for the chain, and room would probably go to zero at that point. But that person can still has access to all of that Bitcoin and Ethereum and Luna and everything else, and they can just walk away very much richer. But you can't do that, and I don't think we can do that reasonably in this approach. If you're doing a cross-chain DEX, if you're doing a DEX within a chain like Cardano or something like this, then you can do that. That actually would suffice probably. But in a cross-chain DEX, because you're maintaining external assets where their value is derived outside of the value of your network, you need to be able to ensure that nobody can sabotage the network.
Mm-hmm. So we have a few more topics to get through in the next probably like 20 minutes, I'd say 25 minutes. So
I've been yammering on forever.
That was good stuff. No, I'm enjoying it. And it's important. Everybody wants caps to be raised. Everybody wants more liquidity. Everyone wants lower slippage and more volume, and $2,000 runes. So this is an important step in that direction. So where are we with pooled validators now, and what's the latest in that front for the network?
Yeah, so I think this just requires more conversation within the community to figure out what we think will be the best approach. And like I said, none of these things are mutually exclusive, so we can do most of them, or all of them, or some of them, or whatever we feel is the best approach. But any one of these things being implemented was just going to create more opportunity for more people to participate and more people to provide rune on the bond side and the security side and help the network scale. So as soon as you make it so that the capital requirements and the technical requirements are basically the same as it is for providing liquidity on the pool side, then the incentive pendulum works extraordinarily well. Like, works perfectly well, because then the friction of doing one or the other is basically the same, and then you can just move back and forth as you see fit. I think that's the ultimate goal. That's obviously a lofty goal or a difficult goal to get to, but that's the ultimate goal. So providing pool validators or vault nodes will definitely push in that direction to allow people with less quantity of rune or less technical capabilities, or both of those things, to participate on the bond side.
Oh, got it. So because if there's pooled validators, then the bonded rune would be much more liquid. Like, it's not likely right now that someone who's running a full validator on their own is gonna, if the incentive pendulum swings and we need more liquidity, or oversecured and under liquid, it's not likely that rune will just like magically evaporate out of the bond side and make its way to the liquidity pools. But in this method with pooled validators, there could be much more reflexivity to the incentive pendulum. That rune can go and chase the best yield pretty quickly.
Yes, that's part of the goal there, is to have that rune be much more fluid. Because right now, when you put in rune on the bond side, you lock it up until you churn out of the network, and then you have access to your rune again, right? Which is like that for very good reasons of maintaining security and maintaining all these things. But to have people fluidly move from one side to the other is kind of partially the goal. And so whenever you're pooling if you're not running the infrastructure yourself, and I just provide capital, I can be able to move it and over to one side or the other, back and forth. That's the idea. That's the goal. That's probably the grand prize in a sense, because then the incentive pendulum is the most effective, and that the friction on one side is equal to the friction on the other side, and then it moves much more smoothly back and forth.
So to maybe a quick recap here. So pooled validators it's a proposal right now in discussion. Is that a
it's a proposal in discussion. Some team members are for it. Some core devs are against it, right? And I think it just requires more conversation and more conversation within the community. I think we're going to develop the feature. It's because it's not that hard to develop. It's not like a huge undertaking. And then we have it at the ready, and then we'll kind of have the conversation with people, and the community can decide whether they love it, they hate it, whatever else.
Cool. Yeah, I think I think there's trade-offs on both sides. Obviously, if there's people for, people against, that conversation I imagine is happening in the THORChain Devs Discord.
That's the monthly place. The economic design channel is also too. We can have that conversation if they want to. I think when the PR gets opened, and that being the kind of the proposal in a sense, we'll kind of really engage in the community at that point and get their viewpoints. And we'll line it out like, here's the pros, here's the cons, and have at it. Should we do it? Should we not do it?
Awesome. Well, I think I can speak for a shared sentiment amongst a lot of the community, which is we love the idea of single-sided exposure and yield on native Rune and or on Rune, and no impermanent loss. And so that's something that's attractive about bonding to a node, but shy of having $1.8 million and always on DevOps, role, like anything to democratize access to that side of yield in THORChain, I think would be that's the upside, and I'm sure it comes with some technical questions to ask as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, all right, next topic, and thank you, by the way, for everyone tuning in. This is the THORChain Weekly Hangout, generally hosted on the THORChain official Twitter account, but we're here on the THORGuards account today. We'll be back on the THORChain official Twitter account next week. I'm 0x Saigon from THORGuards and Runebase, talking with Chad Barraford, core dev, lead dev for THORChain. And we are talking about THORChain updates. So pooled validators we talked about, and now let's talk about retiring BEP2 and ETH Rune. So let me see, Chad, if I can set the stage for this, and then you can talk about where this conversation.
Let's push that Let's push that one down to the bottom, just because the other ones are more relevant to like this week, and that one's relevant to like 6 months from now.
Okay. Yeah, in that case, we can even just delete that from the conversation. We'll get to it if we happen to have time.
If we have time to, we can get back to it. I want to get through the things that are relevant to like this week.
Awesome. So, in order of priority, what do you want to do? TSS vulnerability, Dodo,
let's do
0 stage.
Let's do the TSS vulnerability. So, I meant to post something in the THORnode Chaos thing last night, and I slipped my mind, but I'll do that later today. So there was a TSS vulnerability discovered on the Binance TSS library, which THORChain does import. That was discovered by a security researcher, which we talked about. We mentioned in the THORnode channel a while ago, but we didn't want to expose the details of anything quite yet, because that library is used by a bunch of different projects, and we don't want to disclose information publicly about a possible threat without all the other teams and projects being aware of that, and mitigating their own situations first before we go publicly and tell the world of a larger issue, right? So we were never at risk ourselves. It requires a keygen to happen or a churn to be happening where this exploit could be exploited. And so we just kind of like paused churning entirely until a fix has gone out and all these kind of things. Upon closer inspection of our code base, the Binance library has that exploit, but we have additional validations or checks in THORnode itself that protected us from this particular exploit. So we actually weren't even actually exposed to it at all. But we thought so. We might have been in the very, very beginning. So we just kind of paused churning and until we've kind of established that, or at the very least, patch the issue. So a change is going on to patch the underlying library anyway, even though we're not really susceptible to it, but we should patch it anyway, just for good measure. And everything is fine in this regard. But I wanted to kind of let the community know of that vulnerability that was discovered by a researcher, and we were kind of we did what we needed to do to protect the funds and protect the network and all these kind of things. And we'll be enabling churning again once we release the next version. I think version 77. I think it is. Yeah.
Cool. And just to get anybody else who's unfamiliar up to speed, TSS is threshold signature schemes, and it's would you call it a protocol or a standard? It's similar to multisig, but and it's the standard through which these all these collective nodes can reach consensus to send funds after like an LP position is withdrawn or a trade is made on THORChain. The nodes collectively bring together their signatures in this threshold signature scheme in order for those funds to move. Is that an accurate?
Yeah, no, that's about right.
Of,
yeah, the
okay.
threshold signatures is very much like multi-sig, and the important different thing from multi-sig is that but threshold signatures function the same way as a regular signatures. They appear and they look like on the chain as identical to any signature. So the collection of signatures happen off chain rather than happening typically on chain for multi-sig.
Mm-hmm. Now, a question I had about that is, does any chain that integrates with that THORChain wants to integrate with, they have to like have this standard built in, or is this something that happens like above the like L1? So
No,
like,
it's above. And so that's the reason why we chose to go with official signatures, because you don't need to wait for chain A, B, C, and D to add support for threshold signatures, as they do add support for multi-sig, right? It doesn't matter whether they support it or not. They already do. And it works with ECDSA, it works with EDSA, like whether it's like a crypto node based chain or something more like Bitcoin. It doesn't matter. It all just works out of the box. You don't need to worry about it. The problem with multi-sig is that each chain might implement it and might not, which limits how many chains you can connect to. But even ones that do implement it, like they limit how much you can use it. Like I think for Bitcoin, it's like 20 multi-sigs is the max you're allowed to have. That means you can only have like 20 validators or 20, members that are maintaining all the Bitcoin in the network. And that's just like, it's not something we, would aspire to do that. That just seems, not the right tool for the use case. And so here we can.
So as far as any.
Yeah. Here I was going to say, we can have as many as you want. Threshold signatures, you literally scale as high as you want. I mean, there's a con to going. The higher you go, you have a quadratic relationship to the speed of which it takes to sign a transaction. So you don't want to go like a bazillion, because then it would take like 10 years to sign a single transaction, which would be completely pointless and completely impractical. So we actually scale up to about 40 nodes at the current moment per threshold signature. We could increase that to 50. It's an arbitrary number, really. Like it's a one line change. It's actually a Mimir command as well. So if we want to scale up to 50 or 60, we could. Maybe that will happen. I don't know. But that'll be up for a future community to kind of debate and argue about the pros and the cons, the merits and the faults.
Cool. Awesome. So to recap, TSS is a standard that THORChain uses. Did you say it was published by Binance?
Yeah, the original, the threshold signatures implementation, original one was published by Binance, which is really well done. It was audited and all these things. Like it's being used by a lot of different teams and groups, which is great.
Nice. There was a there's a vulnerability that was surfaced by a white hat that exposed a potential attack vector for projects that were using TSS. THORChain itself was not actually exposed to that attack vector thanks to other checks in the THORChain implementation, but the THORChain team, including Chad, helped contribute to the patching of that TSS issue.
Yep.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, it's awesome. True. There actually was another TSS phone that was out like weeks, the same library, same Binance library. Like this is like a month ago or 2 months ago. And THORChain actually like headed up the team to pay out this researcher, I think like $500,000. And so like we were actually, funding in some sense of like the security researchers to continue to make sure that threshold signatures is not only secure for us as in THORChain, but also secure for the greater ecosystem. And we're putting our money where our mouth is in that sense, because it's really very good use of capital, if you ask me.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. All right. So TSS vulnerability, check. Next, Dodo pool going to 0. This is something I just got a notification on from the THORChain alert spot, but I wasn't actually up to speed on the context around it. So what is the context around this Dodo pool?
This is actually kind of a fun one in some sense, because it was such a wacky scenario, and it just kind of like, it's kind of fascinating how it kind of unraveled. But basically, there was like one person that had like 99.98% of like the Dodo pool, like that. There was like that was the sole liquidity provider practically. There's like 4 or 5 other individuals, but the total value of what they provided versus what this one provider provided was like, basically nothing, right? And so what ended up happening was this person withdrew 100% of the dodo of their position in the dodo pool, which, because the dodo is actually like spread out across 2 Asgards and then 46, I think, Yggdrasils, it created like, I think like 48 transactions on the Ethereum on the Ethereum blockchain to like to send out all of this dodo simultaneously to this individual, right? And so it ended up having like 48 transactions, which cost a bunch of money and gas, as you could probably imagine. And then because the gas we used to pay for those transactions was all basically the same amount, and we put so many transactions in the same second, we basically stampeded ourselves. And so it had some of those transactions fail and some of those transactions, be successful, which put the network into a kind of a slightly wonky state. Nothing bad or anything, like nothing like, everything recoverable, not even a big deal at all if you want to, but like it was just kind of this really interesting, kind of funny way. And so to make things even more extreme, because the gas used to send out the funds was more than the value in the remainder of the pool, that's why the room value, the room balance value went down to 0 because the network had to swap some of their dodo into Rune and then give that to the reserve temporarily, and then the reserve will pay off the gas when it gets sent out later in a little bit there. But because there wasn't enough room left in the pool to pay for all of that gas of those 48 transactions, they went down basically to 0. The room balance down to 0. So once it got down to 0, because the room balance was 0, which is kind of like a non-thing, it shouldn't happen in general. You couldn't swap, you couldn't add liquidity, you couldn't withdraw liquidity. There's all these kind of checks and to make sure that you don't divide by 0 by accident or something like this in the code base, which would cause a panic and a larger issue. And so the network kind of protected itself in that kind of weird edge case scenario that should never happen, but in this rare kind of extreme case of you didn't have 100%. If you had 100% of the pool, it would have been fine. They had 99.98, and so it caused this kind of interesting, this kind of issue. In the end, we got it all fixed, and it's not a big deal. And we'll be making some changes in the next week or so to be more resilient against this kind of weird extreme edge case. But it was kind of an interesting situation that unfolded yesterday. Did we lose Thorgard?
Whoops, sorry, I was on mute there. Interesting. Oh, it's fascinating to kind of uncover these extreme edge cases that kind of bubble up and get solved and cool. So is that solution kind of like shift and that pool is back to normal or stage for that?
The pool is back to normal. That was not much of an issue. Partly the funny thing is that if this was not Ethereum, if this was like a BEP2 asset or something else, then it wouldn't have been an issue. It's only because Ethereum is Ethereum, and the way that it handles gas is different than any other chain, and the gas is so expensive on Ethereum. Like it's only because of this kind of weird one chain problem. It wouldn't be a problem with probably any other chain in the space. It would be. It's kind of funny, but yeah, cool. Yeah. Everything's back to normal. Awesome. The pool's back up and all that stuff.
Cool. Sounds good. All right. Last but not least, unless we have time for the retiring of BEP2 and Ethereum, which is kind of curious, talk about StageNet. So this is a tweet that went out on THORChain Twitter recently, which is like the one thing that Chads need to be, I'm paraphrasing from memory here, but the one thing that Chads need to be excited about this like right now is StageNet coming to THORChain. So can you talk about what is StageNet and why it's important for the ecosystem?
Yes. So StageNet is a new kind of developed environment that is like testnet, but it doesn't run on testnet infrastructure. It runs on like mainnet infrastructure, but just like a scaled down. It's like a real THORChain, but it's like very much small, scaled down, just for testing purposes. It has actual money on, like actual Bitcoin, actual like real assets, not testnet assets. And that's used just to kind of try out new chains. So when we want to try out like Dogecoin or Terra or Gaia or whatever else in the world, so we'll be deploying to StageNet first, just to kind of do some testing there, and then moving on to mainnet. The reason why you want to do StageNet and not testnet is because testnet is very unreliable. We've had so many problems in the past where like it'll go like days without a block being mined for like Litecoin, for example. Like it's always just like you just constantly see these like weird things happen that you would never see in a real situation, and it just makes it more difficult to actually test and try things. And then also like acquiring testnet Luna and acquiring testnet, Atom Coin, like all these kind of things, like that is just a super pain in the ass. It's just so much cleaner, easier, and simpler just to like, oh, we'll just buy some Atom, we'll buy some Luna, we'll buy some Doge or whatever. Like that's just readily available. We can spend a little money and do that. It's not a big deal. But the network itself will have like very, very small amount of actual funds. Technically, you can swap it if you really wanted to, but you'll get hit with swap fees pretty high, so you probably wouldn't really want to use it for like actual trading. But it's there mainly just for testing purposes. And so I think the team will be, the Nine Realms team is working on this now. They've already spun up the first Genesis node, or the first like block has already been mined for StageNet. They're just spinning up more validators for the time being. And then we've already acquired liquidity for the layer one. So we bought some Bitcoin and Litecoin and BNB and a bunch of other assets to kind of fund these pools. But yeah, it's that's gonna be kind of like the playground to test out these new things.
Got it. Yeah, and there's a lot of initiatives that around like this theme, and I loved this kind of notion that was shared. It was either the THORChain Twitter account or the Nine Realms Twitter account, but like 2022, it's going to be about security, scalability, and hardening the network. And like there's a bunch of initiatives that are happening in the ecosystem right now that are around this notion of securing and hardening the network. Lessons learned coming out of this summer and this summer. And so some of those things include like THORSec, which reviews every update before going into production,
Mm-hmm.
and then also like if I understand correctly, there's like a community swarm. There's a war room that's being kind of created. What is it called? Like the Thor. There's some a name around it, but it's this initiative to essentially get the community to test and do like test penetrations and test like every update before it goes into production. And I imagine a lot of that can happen here on StageNet with real assets, but in a test environment.
Yeah, there's so many different test environments. There's like mocknet, testnet, StageNet, chaosnet, and they all have different reasons and purposes for existing for different use cases. But you could do those testing on StageNet as well. I think the war game for like synthetics, for example, will probably happen on StageNet just because we don't want to give out real assets to people, right? To test out, nor do people want to spend their real actual money trying to mess around with synthetics or whatever in case there's an issue or whatever, or like we don't want to.
So that'll happen on testnet.
I think it'll happen on testnet, but to be honest, that's really more of a call for the Nine Realms team, who's really kind of heading up this aspect. I think there's benefits to doing both, to be honest with you. I think doing a first pass on testnet and then seeing how it goes, and then once you get a good amount of confidence in it, then you can go ahead and do a stage implementation of it. But even when we run it on like chaosnet, like for synthetics, for example, like we'll probably limit the amount of synthetics in the network to be like maybe 5% of the pools, like keep it real small in the very, very beginning, just to kind of so that if anything happens in one direction or the other, that it's not like a whole lot of capital at risk, and the team, it'd be easier for the team to financially support if there was some sort of mistake where somebody like lost some funds. We could just go ahead and refund those individuals or whatever. And so we want to keep our exposure small to begin with, and then we'll kind of ramp it up over time. Just not much different how we raise the caps for THORChain itself.
Awesome. Just out of curiosity, you said so this is actually in this is live now. Nine Realms has it set up. Mined the first block already.
Mm-hmm.
Assets have been acquired for I guess like node and the nodes and the LP positions. Curious how much capital like was invested in those in getting those assets. Like how much node was Rune was bonded, and how deep are the liquidity pools across the different pools in StageNet?
That's a good question. I actually don't know the answer to this question. I have to ask the team over Nine Realms how
That's
much
interesting.
they put into it. But I can imagine it's not going to be large. It's going to be quite small, but it's not going to be so small that it's not useful.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a happy medium to strike there. And so it'd probably maybe be like $10,000 a pool, maybe, or something like this. That's what I would do if it was me, or just to keep it simple and small.
And I imagine there'd also have to be a balance of Rune that was allocated for. Well, are there block rewards on StageNet, like for LP positions and nodes?
Probably not. Probably not.
Okay.
The reserve is would probably not be. Maybe they decided to do it anyway, just to create a more similar to real life kind of quote, implementation. But I don't see a real need to add additional room in that regard. We don't want people to participate in this to earn money, right? And that's what block rewards is for, is to help you kind of increase your yield. Like you're not gonna add liquidity to the Bitcoin pool here and make major dollars on swap fees and stuff like that. That's probably not going to happen. So that's not really for like people who want to earn yield. It's really just for people who want to like kick the tires on a new feature and see if you can find a bug or an issue and report to the team. And if you do, then we'll probably flick you some Rune as a thank you for helping us to discover a bug or issue or problem.
Cool. Awesome. So StageNet is coming to THORChain. Extremely exciting. All right. So that does it for like the main points of conversation. We have this last bullet point of retiring BEP2 and ETH Rune. We have about 10 minutes left in the call. We can go over if we want to, but real quick, before we get to this one, since this is a bit forward looking, did want to give UncleBadgers a chance to give us an update from the THORSwap and THORChats DAO side of things. Badgers, you with us?
Hello.
It's our favorite Liverpool representative. How are we doing today, sir?
I am good. How are you, sir?
Doing very well, thank you. It's been exciting watching THORChats DAO's trophies, first chests and now trophies touching above water, and I know THORSwap has been busy as well. You want to give us a quick update on what's happening across both those projects?
Yeah, shall do. We released the NFT trophies early this week and then revealed them yesterday, so that was pretty interesting. And we're also doing a collaboration with Full Gods, so we will be giving away said trophies and said NFTs at some point as well, which is exciting. So that's THORChats DAO. And then with THORSwap, we've had a massive week last week with launching Olympus Pro, and we've actually acquired 300,000 in USD worth of assets currently. And the main like deployment for this was actually to help like not only us but also like THORChain's network stability. So if anyone doesn't know about Olympus Pro, basically you provide an asset and then you get discounted Thor for that asset, and you acquire it via a bond. And the bond's a contract with you and us, and it's vested over 7 days. And then it's linear vested, so you receive the discount of Thor. And the main perks of this is because of the assets we are attaining. So one of the main things that helps with network stability is we are essentially retiring ETH.Rune. So you can provide Ethereum ERC20 Rune and you get discounted Thor. So we've already retired like 100K worth in 1 week, which is a big number, which is great. So, and we're going to use that ETH.Rune, and we can use this. So we're 5% of the way there, running a node just from Olympus Pro bonds. So we could run nodes with this Rune. So we retire the Rune, we upgrade it to native Rune, and then we can start running nodes with it. So that's pretty cool, and that will help the the stability of the network. And the main reason why we did this is because if you look at the statistics on the volume on THORChain, our pool was way too deep. It was over efficient, and therefore it made liquidity ineffective, and like it put an inefficient demand on nodes, and it made being a node less lucrative. So therefore less bonding happened. If you look at the stats, like the IDOs took up 30% of the liquidity, yet we're only less than 1% of the volume. So then that means that puts demand on the nodes to bond for our LPs, and it just makes it inefficient. So we basically reduced our liquidity by 50% just from changing this incentive pendulum. We create our own little incentive pendulum, which basically we want more people to single-sided stake, and we want more people to use Olympus Pro to bond, essentially. So we reduced our farming emissions, and we also increased the emissions for single-sided staking, and then we introduced Olympus Pro. So all of that is like a massive, like game theory, THORSOP incentive pendulum. Basically, we want to increase the stability of THORChain network, as well as increasing like the efficiency of our liquidity pools.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. And it's interesting to get that kind of insight into into some of these ways that ecosystem partners are helping secure the base layer. And also very exciting to hear that you guys are working with Olympus Pro. I think that's a great development. And I think THORstarter is as well, if I'm not mistaken.
They are indeed. For the X Moon ETH pools, yeah. So yeah, we're basically like creating protocol owned nodes for THORSOP, as well as protocol owned liquidity. So it's it's a win-win for everyone, essentially. Everyone gets discounted Thor. We help the stability of the network whilst also acquiring our own liquidity. So it's pretty much a win-win.
Awesome. Yeah, glad to hear it. Badgers, thank you so much for that update. And also, as Badgers mentioned, THORChad's DAO and THORguards will be collaborating for an NFT giveaway. I think that'll be announced on Twitter here later today. And so keep your eyes peeled for that. Super exciting. The artwork looks great. Congratulations on shipping that. And we're excited to be partnering with you guys to help spread the word amongst the community.
Awesome, man. Take it easy. Thank you for having me on.
All right, Badgers. Take care, buddy. Awesome. So back to Chad. Chad, we have one last point we could talk about here and then go into AMA, like invite anybody to come on stage, or what do you think? Or we can just save this for another conversation.
Well, we don't have much time left, so we'll just save it for next week. There's no rush on this whole Bet2 retiring thing. So unless if people want to talk about it, they can. If you want to raise your hand and ask me a question or whatever, we can have a conversation.
Yeah, let's do this. Let's invite anybody in the community here to raise your hand and request to come on stage if you have a question for Chad. And so we can open up to AMAs now if anybody does want to raise their hand. And in the meantime, while we wait for folks to raise their hand or not, let's touch on this, because I actually am kind of curious here. I do think that having like 3 different types of rune, I see why it happened, but it can present some confusion sometime. So yeah, what Chad, why don't you give us a quick rundown there, and then we'll get some friends on stage.
Yeah, so we originally had Bet2 rune to start the thing, to start the project, and the reason why that was more than any reason from my memory, hopefully I'm remembering correctly here, is that we wanted to launch an asset just to start funding the project, because your project is not really a project until it has a coin in some sense. And so we wanted to be able to launch a project and be able to generate some investor funds, some capital, so that we could start, hiring a team and building the project and making this whole like THORChain thing come to life, as we've obviously done. And so it started off as a Bet2 project. I don't even know why it was Bet2, to be honest with you. I don't think I was even part of that discussion at the time, but we went Bet2 on Finance Decks, and we raised 1.5 million, and it obviously grew. We started like Rune Vault and started to be able to distribute the coins to a bunch more people, blah blah, all this kind of stuff. At the time, we weren't even sure if we were going to use our own native token with it, because from a technical perspective, you don't have to. You could use a BEP2 or external asset. It just became much more powerful and more things we could do with it if it was a native token. So we decided to kind of make that switch from single chain KSNet to multi-chain KSNet. And then we launched Ethereum, the ERC20 version of Rune, about a few months before we started multi-chain, just because we wanted to kind of like prep the spring, if you want to like call it that. Like we wanted people to start holding, Rune, who are, ETH people, because some people they'll never hold a BEP2 token because they hate Binance, which is, some people in the world. But we wanted to be able to like kind of start engaging with the Ethereum community and start getting them excited, getting them kind of like learning about the project and kind of like pulling on that, so that when we launched multi-chain, we had a community on the Ethereum blockchain that people were, ready to kind of like already aware of the project and already kind of part of it and that kind of stuff. But once we had multi-chain launch with our own native asset, we always knew that was the end all be all, right? That was the direction we wanted to go as a project and as a community. And so that's been, it's been how many months has it been since we launched multi-chain? It's been like 8 months or so, something like that. We'll probably go mainnet, a year after we launch, so maybe another couple months, maybe another few months, and then we were talking about the idea of how do we apply more pressure to kind of get rid of these BEP2 Ethereum things and move towards the true asset, which is native Rune, for simplicity purposes, to help push exchanges that do want to integrate with THORChain, that they integrate with native Rune more, and all this kind of stuff. And so the core team kind of came up with an idea of how to do that, and the concept is that we have this switch memo right now where you can switch your 1-to-1 ratio from your BEP2 Rune or your ETH Rune to native Rune, and just kind of trades it. It burns one and mints the other, right? So that the circulating supply of Rune doesn't, change as part of this. And so the idea was that to help kind of facilitate people to migrate into native Rune and start participating more into the network, and because we want as much productive capital as we can get. Unproductive capital is not as useful to the project as productive capital is. Mm-hmm. And so the idea is that over time, instead of getting a 1-to-1, it's like, a 99 to 100, and then, a 98 to 100, and then a 97 to 100, and it kind of slowly deteriorates over a long period of time. The initial time we kind of estimate to be like a year. So like, day one would be a 100 to 100 ratio, and then a year later, it's a 1 to 100 ratio or something like this, right? To help kind of facilitate people to move into this newer asset. That's the idea. That's the concept. We wanted to float with the team, float with the community, float with the greater sphere, get some feedback, get some thoughts. Does it make sense? Does it not make sense? Is there some changes we should make to it? Should we not do it at all? Like all of that should be discussed along the community to figure out what makes the most sense.
Awesome. So another conversation, very early stage, but a conversation that I imagine is also being had in the THORChain Devs Discord, possibly under the economic design channel.
It's right now. I think most of it is in the. Let me go look real quick. It's in the general channel. There's a thread called Kill Switch, Project Kill Switch. Operation Kill Switch.
Sounds good. Well, thank you for that update, Chad. Great to hear some of these ideas, conversations that are being discussed very early on. And with that, let's open up to some community questions here. I brought a couple of friends on stage here. Looks like we just lost Thor Mike, but we have THORChain Vegan online with us. Vegan, can you hear us?
Yeah, good morning. Thanks to the devs and the whole team for making the project a success. I wanted to ask two related questions. One, perhaps I'm not understanding things, but why no delegated proof of stake for light nodes, since light nodes can't Sybil attack the system? And the second related question is, any updates on iRune? I know it's related to synths, but it seems like part of the issue is that there's no single-sided staking option for Rune. Light nodes, as far as I can tell, will require have a high technical barrier to entry and involve this KYC issue potentially. So is there any talk about iRune or expediting that? So those are my two questions. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So first question about light nodes or vault nodes. So there's two ways you can approach this idea, right? And I don't think we haven't figured out which one is the right one to go. But so one is that you can have vault nodes with anonymous pooled rune, right? So that you can do what you're kind of like a delegated proof of stake thing. You can do that with vault nodes, as you were just saying, because you don't have risk of cyber attack. You still have risk of you're being rug pulled by stealing all the funds underneath it all. No, but if you do it in a way that the node operator has, puts in 1,000 rune, let's just say, or 50,000 rune, let's just say, and then you can probably accept up to 50,000 rune of other people's liquidity and still be relatively pretty safe, because you can slash the node operator first before you slash the other individuals who are not running the actual node, right? And so you can do that, and that will probably have a very good chance of being safe. But the problem is you're limiting the amount of rune that can be added to this vault node. It's limited by the amount of rune that the node operator put up, right? And that's the negative of that approach. The other approach to this concept is saying, okay, it's not anon. You have to KYC each other. That way, if somebody rug pulls, each other's identity. You can, have a contract with them. You can sue them. Break their legs. I don't know, like however you want to structure your relationship with this other individual who's running the node, or you're running the node to the other individual. And in that scenario, because of your KYC to each other, you have trust between each other. So you don't need an economic incentive to make sure everything's secure. You have trust between you and the other individual. And so therefore you can have as much rune as you want. The vault node can grow to be huge amounts of rune, and maybe, 9 rune will be one of these people, for example, and you can just toss in rune all day, and you can scale up the bond side of the network almost arbitrarily, in a sense. So that's the two different approaches that I think that we have to think about, and there's pros and cons to both, and the community can decide upon which one. Do they like the easier, simpler? I don't need to meet people and have contracts and decide who's a good node operator and just give them rune and I make some yield on that. But you're limiting the amount of rune that can go into the bond side. Or, okay, it takes a little bit more work. I have to meet people. I have to have a contract. I have to, it's a little bit more about setup here. But the network can scale better with that approach in terms of the amount of rune on the bond side. So that's the pro and the con, but the community can get together and decide upon which implementation makes the most sense for the project. Yeah. That makes sense? The first question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Personally, I would think that eliminating any KYC or meeting in person would probably actually allow more bonded rune, even though rune would be limited in those pools. But that'll be a good community discussion on Discord, I'm sure.
Yeah, people can discuss it. Maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. I don't pretend to know. All I know is that if you're limited to basically whatever the amount of funds that node operators of vault nodes put together, that's the limit. You can't go higher than that number. So if we're in a situation where there's lots of vault nodes operators and there's lots of capital in this sense, then maybe you're right. Then we can do that, and that's probably enough for what the project needs. Or if there's not a lot of people who can or have the skill sets or the capital to be a vault node operator, then maybe that's not the right choice, right? So what is true, which one's false or true, whatever, I don't know. Right. I think we're just going to take more time to figure that out and maybe try some things, throw some spaghetti in the wall and see what fits, what sticks and what doesn't. And that might be the ending result. Some of this is just trying to establish what human behavior is, and that's I'm not always great at human behavior personally. So I don't always know. Oh, and you had a second question. What was your second question?
It's about iRune.
iRune, yeah. iRune seems to solve the single-sided staking issue. And so any updates on that being expedited, since that might satisfy a lot of people's needs?
Yeah, so single-sided staking on the rune side has to be done with a particular caution, right? And that is, you want to make sure that if people are providing rune, that it's providing value to the network, right? It's not a staking option like you would see on, some like Tezos, for example, or, other chains, because those don't actually provide any value to the network, right? You're you're not adding to the security. You're not really necessarily adding to the pools, depending upon how iRune is actually implemented. So you have to make sure that it's productive capital, that it's providing a service for the network. That's the most important thing, right? Furthermore, if you go down the road of synthetics and it's a synthetic rune can be problematic for the network in the sense that it creates cell pressure on the rune asset itself, right? So it's a little bit counterintuitive, but bear with me here. So say you have, you're accepting Bitcoin, right? Someone's swapping Bitcoin to synthetic Bitcoin. The natural tendency of that is that you're adding Bitcoin to the pool, which means you're low on rune, which means that an arbitrage bot will buy rune off of the market to swap, rune into the Bitcoin pool and take out Bitcoin on the other side, right? That's the natural balancing act that happens when you mint a synthetic Bitcoin from Bitcoin, right? You do it from rune, the opposite happens. You're buying Bitcoin off of the market and you're selling rune, right? So you're creating the inverse, basically, economic pressure of which asset you're providing into the network, as confusing that it might sound. So allowing the network to do synthetic rune and allow them to earn interest on that synthetic rune comes at a cost that it creates by a sell pressure on the rune asset. And it's not necessarily beneficial for accumulating value or accumulating wealth into the rune asset itself. So with all that in mind, if we end up doing some sort of iRune implementation, which we still need to kind of think of a better approach, we need to make sure that it doesn't actually have the inverse effect and actually harm the network in the process of doing it. We need to make sure that it doesn't harm the network and that it actually provides value to the network. It can't just sit there and just earn more room without actually doing anything. It has to get that room from somewhere, and you have to provide value to that thing that is creating the room to pay out that system. That's it in a nutshell. And we're open to any ideas or implementation details people want to talk about, and we can float ideas and concepts and see what works and what doesn't work and all that kind of stuff. But I think the most way of in my view, if you want to earn rune on your rune, the best way to do that is not so much iRune, it is providing bond to the network, because we want all that capital to be efficient, right? To be useful. So by providing somebody the ability to jump in onto a vault node or a pool validator or whatever the thing is, and then earning 10, 12, 15, whatever the percentage is, 20%, whatever the hell the number is, on their rune, earning rune on the rune, that's all you're trying to accomplish. It doesn't matter if it's iRune in the sense of synthetic rune or not, but you're just trying to figure out a way for me to easily earn more rune on my rune. And the most efficient way of doing that is providing bond and then getting, node rewards sent to you to get more rune on your rune. And you're providing an important service for the community of being able to increase the pool depths and all that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Vegan, thank you for the question. Was that satisfactory? You understand?
Yeah, thanks so much. That makes sense. My only thought is I wonder if there's some way to integrate it with POL to make it work, but that's probably a broader discussion. But thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Yeah, POL, we can, I'm not going to go too much in the depths here, but we could go into that idea and concept and explore more ideas around that concept. I don't know how to do that in a way that makes sense off the top of my head, because generally speaking, whenever it goes into the POL, stays in the POL, unless there's some sort of real reason to pull it out. But generally speaking, that's how POLs are generally designed. The current design idea that we're kind of kicking around, the POL is used to kind of help facilitate lending and Thor savings and all these things as it needs to, but it's really more there as a backup, not really commonly used. But more decision and research needs to be done, and which is being worked on.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries.
Chad, thank you for taking the time. We appreciate the work that you're doing and that you're spending time with the community here on this call for the update. Everyone, thank you guys all so much for tuning in. This has been the THORChain Weekly Hangout. We do these generally every week, twice a month here for Western time zones, and then twice a month for Eastern time zones. Recordings will be published on the Runebase podcast. You can find that at runebase.org or by searching Runebase in your podcast app of choice. And that is all for this week. Chad, thank you again, and have a great weekend ahead.
Thanks, guys. See you next week.